Hello, I'm Paul Beckwith, and in this video, I'm going to talk all about the tipping point impacts. So, in previous videos, I've talked about the Earth system tipping points, and there's many of them, and there's early warning signals and signs that we're getting very close to crossing thresholds of some of these major tipping points, and that will basically change our planet. It'll change our climate on our planet abruptly. And of course, these Earth system tippings will have huge impact on society, on people, on cities, on the way we carry about our lives. Huge impacts. And those are less talked about. So this is the global tipping points. If you just Google global tipping points 2023, I'll put the link in the description. Then you come across, this is a particular section all about these impacts of tipping points. And it's very important, so I'm continuing to go through this report. So let's have a look at the summary, basically. So Earth system destabilization and tipping points, of course, can have far-reaching and catastrophic consequences across various critical sectors. So assessments of climate change, they often overlook the consequences of climate tipping points. With national evaluations on climate change impacts, they lack in-depth quantitative analysis, they rely on expert opinions, and they pretty much ignore tipping points. For example, permafrost thaw, forest dieback, those things could lead to localized effects through the land surface changes and also regional climate alterations, as well as global impacts through shifts in the atmospheric and ocean circulations. So these changes carry the potential for severe impacts on people and ecosystems, including major impacts on water availability, global food supply, which I talk about often, energy security, health, communities, and economies. It ripples through the entire human system. So climate change, especially if compounded by Earth system destabilization, right, crossing these major tipping points, these Earth system tipping points, there's a huge potential to set off negative social tipping points that would lead to catastrophic impacts for human societies. So this sort of, what we're talking about, negative social tipping points, that's like a breakdown of social cohesion in society. There's a word for that. It's called anomie. Anomie. Let's have a look at anomie. Anomie is a social condition defined by an uprooting or breakdown of any moral values, standards, or guidance for individuals. So a good example is, let's see, what's a modern example? Okay, there's a feeling of disconnectedness due to a lack of shared social values and norms that occurs within many high-rise residences. So live in a high-rise apartment building, there's a lot of this disconnectedness feeling. Anomie even has its own Wikipedia page. Okay, it's a social condition. It's defined by an uprooting or breakdown of any moral values, standards, or guidance for individuals to follow. The work was first done on the term. The term was popularized by a French sociologist, Émile Durkheim, in a book he wrote in 1897 called Suicide. Okay, so he talked all about anomie. So this disconnectedness, this lack of direction, lack of shared goals, lack of ability of an individual or desire to actually help their community. So let the garbage pile up. Don't care about the crime in your area. Just put up with it and ignore it if you like. That's anomie. It's basically a loss of shared values and norms. What happens is it fosters radicalization, polarization of people. It drives societies ideologically further apart. It rips into the very fabric of society. Sound familiar to what's happening today? Destabilization caused by environmental shifts could lead to societies tipping into anomie, radicalization, widespread displacement of populations, conflict over limited resources, and economic instability. All of these things are happening big time today. These negative social tipping points could reinforce each other in domino-like cascades, creating systemic risk, so overall system risk, amplifying the impacts of the climate and potentially accelerate climate change, right? Denialism, protests against carbon fees, all those sort of things that are happening today. These social tipping points and cascades mean the future will not adhere to business as usual. Rather, it will be defined by either constructive mitigation and adaptation to climate change or negative social change, impeding the realization of a sustainable future. I'd say the latter is happening big time. Okay, but we don't know so much about these things, so the confidence in many impacts is low. There's a lack of systematic assessments and the difficulty of forecasting social change. So figuring out what's going to happen in social systems is very, very difficult. Okay, so the key messages of this impacts chapter, tipping point impacts, is that the Earth system tipping points have the potential for major severe impacts on people and biodiversity. Negative social tipping points triggered by climate change can have catastrophic impacts on human societies, and they can cascade to create systemic risks throughout the entire global system. We can use some early warning signals to anticipate the impact tipping points. One of the early warning signals is just look who's being elected, look at the movement to the far right around the planet. Okay, so, we need to learn more about this, we need to study it, we need to find out ways to combat this as it continues to erode society. Okay, so let's have a look. So negative tipping points. Right. Well, first of all, the concepts of negative social tipping points and systemic risk are crucial. So negative tipping points are those that are predominantly harmful for humans and the natural systems we depend on. So the word negative is used in the value-based sense. It's bad, right? Negative social tipping points are bad. They erode society. They're negative. They're bad for social, economic, and politics. An example that is often used in this chapter is conflict tipping over into violence in the Lake Chad Basin. So Lake Chad was a healthy lake at one point. The lake started drying up, 90% gone. Huge social unrest in those regions, civil wars, strife, crime, murders, total sort of anarchy in that region, directly as a result of the lake drying up, shrinking and drying up, basically. Systemic risk is an important concept. It refers to a critical aspect of complex systems where the functioning of an entire system is compromised due to the interactions among its components. The idea is that the failure of one component in the system, it can trigger a chain reaction of failures in other components, propagating the negative effects across the system, leading to widespread and often unforeseen consequences across the entire system. Not just within a single system, but across different systems and sectors like ecosystems, the health sector, infrastructure, food, movement of people, goods, capital, and information with and across borders, regions, countries, and continents. So, all the borders could just be shut. No immigration in and out. Each country to its own. In a world of diminishing resources with abrupt climate change. Okay, so this chapter looks at all of these things. It talks about just how Earth system tipping points could trigger each other, like a series of dominoes and cascading. Same thing can happen with negative societal and ecological tipping points that could cascade. And again, the Lake Chad thing is brought up. So we do have these early warning signals for these social tipping points, the same as we do for Earth system tipping points. but what actually do we measure? So this is all about that sort of thing. So some of the key sections, basically we're assessing impacts of Earth system tipping points on human society. It's rarely done. We talk about the Earth systems, Earth system components tipping, like the AMOC shutting down, loss of coral reefs, the jet stream going completely bananas, ocean currents shutting down, monsoons changing position and intensity. We talk about all these things, but we don't often talk about how they will affect society, because that's the more sensitive and difficult question to answer. But we need to talk about it. So assessments of climate change effects on humans and ecosystems have previously included only limited information on the consequences of climate tipping points. While some national evaluations have touched on tipping point implications, risk assessments have been largely qualitative, with minimal quantitative analysis. They use expert opinion saying, what do you think is going to happen? They write a report, it's submitted to politicians within countries, and it's completely wrong and completely useless, basically, because it's ignoring the idea of these tipping points. Right? It's a significant knowledge gap, the impacts of these tipping points. Okay, so basically this, they look at all of that sort of thing, here, and it's very important. So they talk about various Earth system tipping points and some of the impacts to people. And here are some of the key messages. We'll just talk about some of the key messages in these sections because, for reasons of time constraint. So the key messages are Earth system tipping points have the potential for severe impacts on people and biodiversity, like Amazon dieback, ice sheet collapse, permafrost thawing, AMOC collapse. They're the most studied tipping points for impacts. They each have the potential for impacts on water supply, global, we're talking about global water supply, global food supply, global energy security, global health, ecosystem services, communities and economies, basically the whole human existence. Amazon dieback could put 6 million people at risk of extreme heat, because if the Amazon dies back, it's replaced, those rainforests are replaced by grasslands and savanna, and the temperatures spike up, and there's extreme heat to all the people living there. The estimated economic damages, US $1 to $3.5 trillion economic damages. The numbers are just staggering. Antarctic ice sheet instability. It could lead to a potential sea level rise of 2 meters by 2100. I still say, can we hit 7 meters by 2070? I just reading Gwynne Dyer's book, Intervention Earth, and, he talks about 4 meters or something, 4 or 5 meters by 2075 being very possible from his latest research for his book. It's going to cause huge coastal flooding events. Permafrost thawing already damages property and infrastructure. 70% of current infrastructure in permafrost regions is an area with high potential for thaw. Permafrost thawing by 2050. By the way, I read I think it's in Dwyer's book, about 50% of human infrastructure is near coastlines. A lot of the world's major cities are near coastlines, that's for sure. So sea level rise is going to just, it's going to be catastrophic for humanity and for societies. An AMOC collapse would disrupt regional climates worldwide, reduce vegetation and crop productivity across large areas of the world. So there's profound implications for food security. Basically, we wouldn't have enough food to feed the world any longer with an AMOC collapse. Europe couldn't grow food, for example. Parts of eastern Canada couldn't grow food. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the figures and some of the cascading. So this is cascading impacts of an AMOC collapse. So AMOC collapse, that's an Earth system tipping point. It would cause regional climate shifts, many physical climate impacts, the impacts on human societies. It would reduce agriculture, our ability to grow food, much reduce food production, It would undermine regional adaptation strategies to gradual climate change, right? It would have huge impacts globally. Cascading impacts of ice sheet instability. So ice sheet collapse and Earth system tipping point, either in Greenland or parts of West Antarctica. We'd have rapid sea level rise, coastal flooding around the world. So we'd get a destruction of coastal infrastructure, forced migration of huge numbers of people due to flooding out of where they're living on the coast. The coast is toast. Remember that saying from, I think it was Tommy Lee Jones in a movie, Volcano. The coast is toast as lava is heading down towards the coast in LA. A volcano appears in LA, and it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. The impacts of various tipping points are looked at. So ice sheets, so ice sheets, so here's, this is the cascading impacts of rising sea levels across systems. You have local mean sea level rise, local extreme sea level rise, submergence of land, and there's direct impacts, land use, human activities, enhanced flooding in all coastal regions, erosion of land and beaches. There'd be salt going into the soils, going into the groundwater and surface waters near the coast. Can't grow food anywhere near the coast. Loss and change in marine and coastal ecosystems, and impeded drainage. So there's all of these sort of different cascading impacts on the systems. This is exposure to multi-century sea level rise at various temperatures. We're already somewhere in here. We're talking about 800 million people affected. A billion people affected. At various temperatures. I think this is very conservative. Talk about sea ice. They talk about permafrost changes and the impacts on people. The impacts of biosphere tipping points like Amazon dieback, for example. You get a huge biome shift. The rainforest is replaced by grasslands and savanna, which is grasslands with the odd tree peppered, sprinkled around. Huge, and temperatures would greatly rise. So this is sort of temperatures with forested, and different scenarios with a lot of the forest being crushed by climate change, converted into savanna. You get huge temperature spikes in this whole region, so huge extended heat waves in this region. That's just one effect, right? We can talk about, this is the socioeconomic impacts of the Amazon dieback, degradation of the forest, reduced river water levels, no more ecosystem services or forest functioning, transports changed, food security in the whole region is cratered, health very negatively impacted, cities and migration, people migrating out of the area, the hydropower in those regions would be devastated. So all of these spin-off effects. There's huge impacts from the AMOC circulation. I said that's the mother of all tipping points, and there's some, the AMOC collapsing, temperatures, would drop a lot in the northern hemisphere. Instead of having crops, we just have grasslands appearing, and the arable or crops would decrease greatly. We'd have trouble growing food. This is just an impact on the UK, for example, which would get a lot colder with an AMOC collapse. So the Earth system tipping points, when they will basically magnify and accelerate the impacts of global warming, and it talks about the various impacts in charts and so on. But let's go to some of the impacts on different sectors of humanity. So water security would be severely stressed. Water quality, fresh water, the ability for societies to get water, rainfall patterns around the world would change. They talk about Bangladesh, they talk about all kinds of different stuff for global water scarcity for over 1 billion people at 3C global warming, 1.16 billion people at 4C. you know, people are still going to be around it if they're still around at those temperatures. Global food security is a huge one. I've often talked about that's one of our weakest areas, the weakest parts of human society. So the food system is a system of systems. We've got the different technology, economic, social system, financial, political, biophysical. All these things are connected. There's feedback loops. There's tipping points. Our ability to grow food is going to be severely stressed by if these Earth system tipping points go. And energy security, also another huge issue, right? Human health. Okay, biodiversity, ecosystem services, collapse, communities, economies, and displacement. They give you an example of the AMOC collapsing. Okay, I like this. This is well worth reading. Social media is awash with frightening rumors. A group of scientists and government officials gather. They give a press conference about an important system of ocean currents in the North Atlantic. Sensors suggest that it's changing, and then the press conference confirms that the AMOC has basically started to collapse. The collapse takes several decades. Northern hemisphere plummets in temperatures. Rainfall completely changes. Monsoon rains start failing. We can't grow food. Dire outlook for food. Can't grow it in Europe. Right, and Europe is hard hit. Arable farming largely lost in the British Isles. Pace and scale of these changes outstrips the ability to diversify which crops are grown and where. Shortages of food and higher prices cascade through connected food systems, driving hunger, malnutrition, social and economic instability globally, and it goes on about the social impacts. Okay, it's a good thought experiment. Just from one collapse, the AMOC, which again is the mother of all tipping points. And then, of course, there's all these negative social tipping points in society, okay? So, basically, this chapter looks at to what extent Earth system destabilization and tipping can trigger negative tipping in various social systems, which can reinforce the destabilization of the Earth system through reinforcing feedback effects, mainly by preventing climate action. Well, gee, what's happening now? Specifically, with the Earth system further destabilizing, we are likely to see social cohesion breaking down, mental disorders and deviant behaviors will increase, further undermining society's ability to respond to crises. We're also likely to see greater radicalization of various groups and polarization, making it harder to find collective solutions. Okay, so basically an undermining of human security by an array of indirect and at times nonlinear pathways, increasing the risk of violent conflict, undermining society's ability to cooperate on climate change mitigation. Further destabilization of the Earth system will trigger large-scale displacement of people. It also leads to trapped populations unable to leave, increasingly inhospitable places, so mortalities go way up. Displacement will increase the ecological pressures within host communities, adversely impacting the Earth system. Financial destabilization will increase, diminishing the means to respond effectively to Earth system destabilization, even rich countries. Okay, so the escalating Earth system destabilization, it threatens to disrupt social cohesion. It'll increase mental disorders, amplify radicalization and polarization, escalate violent conflicts, cause mass displacement and financial instability in societies. It will greatly hamper collective mitigation efforts and capacities to respond to Earth system destabilization. So it impedes the realization of positive futures. If societies fail to restabilize the Earth system, we will not stay in a business as usual state. Through mechanisms of negative social tipping, another social system state will observe, likely characterized by greater authoritarianism, greater hostility, greater discord, and greater alienation. Okay, so you can look at social systems and the negative tipping points from Earth system failures, effects on financial markets, politics, human settlement, social, psychological systems. And basically you can tip into this term, into this state of anomie. It's a state of a society or community characterized by a breakdown of social norms, social ties, and social reality. It results in social disorder and disorganization, disorientation, and disconnection, which manifests itself on the individual level, often through mental health deterioration, increased suicide rates, and or deviant behavior. Okay, so it's a new area, if nascent, it's a new area of research, but there's increasing evidence to say that changes in the Earth system will contribute to all of this and more. Okay, and this is an interesting graphic here, and let's have a look at it. Let's expand it here. So these are things that have happened already. So in the US, the Paradise, the Camp Fire, it led to increased chronic psychological issues in the aftermath, like PTSD and depression among people who lost their homes and had to flee from Paradise. Winter 2013-2014, floods in the UK led to increased mental illness. People whose houses were flooded were 50% more likely to suffer anxiety and depression. Sudan, droughts, desertification led to basically internal displacement, conflicts, rising mental illness, anxiety, depression, acute stress. India, increasing suicide rates among rural farmers during climate-induced heat waves. Okay, and it goes on, like there's examples all over. Okay, so huge impacts, right? There's huge impacts of these, negative impacts on people that are displaced by natural disasters. You know, we're getting the anomie, the lack of cohesion in society. They talk about the dynamics and the feedback of the anomie, how it makes, it basically eliminates our ability to collectively take action against climate change. Okay, there's more radicalization and polarization. I don't need to give you examples of how this is happening today. It's pretty evident to everybody, I think. More and more examples coming. There's radicalization and polarization tipping dynamics can feed back and make climate change much worse. I think you can clearly see how that happens. And displacement of people, more and more people having to migrate, countries closing their borders, right, and just basically turmoil, okay, being amplified. You know, there's a trapped population that basically can't move, so they're just exposed to more and more hazards, and most people will eventually die in that region. Violent conflict, and they give a case example. Hurricane Katrina, the displacement of New Orleans, how many people left, how many people went back, etc. So it's not just in third world countries, this is right in the US. Violent conflicts and tipping points. So let's go to some of the, they have a case study, Lake Chad. I've already mentioned the drying up of the lake, the loss of the lake, completely destabilized the region, financial destabilization, you know, a 2-degree world might be insurable. A 4-degree world certainly would not be. No insurance on anything, cars, houses, nothing. Imagine a world like that. Cascades of tipping and impacts, right? One tipping leads to another, and so on. So they looked at that. And I just want to show you some case studies. So the Amazon rainforest is one. So here's tipping cascades in the Amazon rainforest. You've got the natural components, the social components, the potential tipping element, forest dieback, the feedbacks, positive or negative, like slowing down or speeding up, and forest fires and deforestation and agriculture changes. So it has all of the different elements and how they're all connected. There's another example of the, this is the tripping cascades in coral reefs and small-scale fisheries. And this is particularly relevant because we have another global bleaching event for coral reefs, and we're going to have a world very, very soon without coral reefs. I highly recommend you listen to Google RU Mundy, M-U-N-D-Y, And, you know, she wrote a song about 7 years ago called Love in the Time of Coral Reefs. And the idea is looking back, coral reefs have all gone, permafrost is tipped. You know, she's got this haunting, wonderful voice, and it's a very spiritual video. It's a 3-minute long song. Highly recommend that you listen to it. Maybe I'll play it in one of my videos. It's that good. So coral, tipping element. You know, water temperature, how the fish and algae and water quality all changes, and then the social components, tourism, nutrition, income, fishing, human activity in coastal environments, how all of those things change for the worse without coral reefs. This is the tipping cascades and migration. Okay, so you get agricultural production lost, you get people migrating out of that region, and how all the different crises can tie in. I think they give the example, yeah, tipping cascades in the Arab Spring. Okay, so we had conflict, we had the Civil War, we had all the migration, strengthening of ISIS, protests, food prices rising huge. So basically, you know, those were the sort of tipping points, and then the, you know, the weather extremes, the drought in the Fertile Crescent, all exacerbated by climate change, and then all of the social components that resulted. So these are things that are happening right now and have happened. Here's the shrinkage of Lake Chad. So all of these different social components stopped, and we had reduced water going in, reduced carbon sequestration, land degradation, and we had huge conflicts in that region. Okay, so all of these things can tie one thing to the other. There are some early warnings of tipping points in the impacts. You know, Trump gets elected, I'd say that's a clear early warning sign. Right? Tipping point research is traditionally focused on the environmental systems, the Earth systems, but there's increased interest in understanding whether the social and coupled social environmental systems that are impacted by Earth system tipping points themselves exhibit characteristics of tipping points, and whether they can be anticipated using early warning signals. So what are the parameters that we look at? I mean, this is an active area of research to look at the right signals, the right parameters, and look for these early warning signals. This loss of resilience of systems, it all applies to social tipping points. And you know, there's coupled human environment systems. We've got the human system, the environment system, and the connections between them all, you know, coupled key feedbacks. So this is a very active area of research. A couple examples: the Black Monday 1987 stock market crash. The correlation actually increased. So this is a human system. You can look at the autocorrelation, and you can see it increasing as you approach this tipping point, just as in many Earth systems. So you can also look at human systems as a result. This is, you know, there's different data visualization dashboard, soil moisture. This is to do with food security. Okay, tipping points in food security or in managed vegetation systems, right? So there's lots of different human systems. I guess, what tipping points do we look at to detect this anomie? Tipping points to detect social crises. You know, what are the most relevant and appropriate data sets for early warning of social tipping points? What are the characteristics of data sets that can render them more or less useful for detecting social tipping points? Which early warning signals, autocorrelation, variance, skewness, threshold exceedance are more meaningful for different applications? Okay, so these are all questions. Do climate tipping points exacerbate poverty traps and other negative development trends? Okay, as critical transitions unfold, how does the risk landscape shift? How do multiple climate extremes and other shocks and stressors combine, especially as slow onset climate change processes occur to drive systematic changes in tipping points? Okay, so how do we integrate this into our work? So there's you know, it's an awesome chapter on the impacts, the impacts of tipping points, right? The Earth system tipping points and how they interact with societal tipping points, create anomie, this feeling of don't care, create conflicts, create and stress the heck out of various sectors, including fresh water, food, governance, etc., etc., etc. And governance is a whole separate chapter, so I'll talk about that next. I think I've gone far enough. Please consider going to my website, paulbeckwith.net, and donating to PayPal to support my research and videos. Thanks again, and bye for now.